Okay, let's talk now about how to design a theory of change workshop. So the first thing to look at, and the first thing that is going to help you and guide you, like in any evaluation, it's all about the purpose and the intended use. This is going to help you understand the context and why they're doing it. It's not the same if a group, an organization is doing their theory of change exercise because they need to do fundraising about a certain present or future project, than a group that is already implementing their program and they're halfway through it, and for whatever the reason they want to now clarify what they're doing, check what they are, and so on. Or if you're intervening or they're developing the theory of change at the end for the evaluation, once the project has already been implemented and they just want to reveal what they did and what they expected to trigger with their activities and their project. So the purpose, why they're doing it for, is very important. So there's this need to define what they're doing it for. But the problem is that the purpose is sometimes blurry. So there you have to need your facilitation skills to clarify it and to see what are the implications of that. And already it's a better sign to find a group who knows very well what they're doing it for than to have to figure it out together. But doesn't mean it's not going to be a good process. So in order to help you understand what are the different purposes that organizations can have to start such process, which is sometimes time-consuming and resource-consuming. It can be pretty fast, but it can also be lengthy. So let's see why they may want to do that. Well, first of all, because it helps formulating out loud what they're trying to do. As a collective exercise is good. It helps the team clarify the program. So one thing is to understand what each other is thinking about the program, and another thing is to come to an agreement. Helps the team understand the logic of each other and validates the logic and the solidity, because usually if it is just in narrative form, it's harder to see where are the weaknesses, but when you put it in a diagram, it often stands out very quickly. Also, it can help identify the linkages between units and help the organization or different organizations even work in a more coordinated way. It can accelerate the onboarding process for new employees. It can help the team to think in a more evaluative way. It can be part of the M&E kind of training, or the M&E function to be more mainstream in the whole team. It's not only monitoring and evaluation. People who wonder, why are we doing what we're doing, what are we achieving, is that every member can have that kind of point of view or those glasses on. Remember that in the first module also we have a long list of uses that are more or less the same. So this is more like a summary. Other potential benefits is to reinforce the M&E framework and to check if the indicators are correct. They can also do it because they don't know what to evaluate. They have a big program, so they want to see it all mapped out, to see how to define the object and the scope of evaluations. They can also use it for fundraising purposes, or for understanding how each of the programs or each of the units come together at some point in what we call an overall theory of change. It can help design new programs or new pilots, and it can also help us check if the cross-cutting issues that we don't want to forget, like being gender-focused or equity-focused or climate change-focused or environment-focused, or any other thing, are consistent across our activities or not so much. So yeah, remember that in the first module we saw internal and external benefits, and also for the monitoring and evaluation function. So even though there are commonalities and every theory of change workshop can be similar to the next one, as many times the possibilities are big. So I'm going to show you now a couple of graphs that I call tensiometers that I used to help the organization and me decide or agree on where to position the approach for the workshop. So the first question I had is that if they wanted a flexible or a set approach. And so at the beginning it was quite flexible, but then I also quickly realized that people needed clear guidance. So you remember the leadership part of it. So at some point we had to make some decisions and decide the approach is this. A very important one, we discussed this. What are we more focused on, the products or on the capacity building? Depending on the context, if we're much more focused on the capacity building side of it, and you could even induce the team members or some of them to facilitate the process. And I have done that in a couple of occasions, because that means that they're starting to think like that. They know what we're looking for. They know what they can create the logic by themselves. While if you just really want the diagrams, you just use people's inputs to create the diagram, but the diagram is not important. What is important is the logical way of thinking. So yeah, this is important. If you're doing at the beginning or at the end of the program or in the middle, if you're going to do it internally, just with your team or participatory, if it is more for internal uses, for your team, for your monitoring and evaluation system, or if it is more for your partners and your donors, if it is higher, lower level, meaning you can do an overall theory of change of your organization, or you can do the theory of change of a small project, or you can do a theory of change of your programs or pilots, so you have to define also what level. Also, it can be done, by the management, by the managers of each program or the higher hierarchy, or everyone involved in that program is going to participate. So that's also important. Similarly with if you have branches, are you going to do it at central level, or are you going to invite the branches to participate? Are we going to be focused on programs or functions? Because I've done also theories of change of functions, like what is the theory of change of the monitoring and evaluation function, or the gender equity unit or advisor function, and so on. And then for existing or new projects. So we have done this before, or this is a new project. Now the phases of the workshop could be this, like designing the workshop, a first draft, designing all these different variables and so how it's going to materialize in real life and the logistics, then preparing, then conducting the sessions, and then internal review of the products, and then we can have another session or not until we have the final session, right? So this is the tricky part, is that one session may be all we have, or we may need as many sessions as needed. And this is what we were talking about, the versions. Sometimes you have the opportunity to revisit the theory of change as many times as you need until they're exactly what the team is trying to do. And that can take 10 versions or 3. And sometimes you only have one, and it's up to them to revisit that and to make sure that it is approved. The ToC facilitator is responsible for all the phases, people reviewing their theory of change. One potential second session that is often shorter, much shorter than the first one, because the first one is the hard one, and so on. The person responsible for that program or for that ToC should be involved in all the stages, in the design, in the preparation, in the first session, in the internal review, in the second session, and in the next reviews, while the facilitator has to be, of course, involved in the design and the presentation and the first and second sessions, but they can review it by themselves, maybe, or you can do both at the same time, and then the team and the stakeholders to be there for the sessions and the reviews. And the question is if you are inviting external stakeholders or not. So this could be a typical agenda of a workshop. I often work with one organization in one country, so I spend the whole week doing theories of change, different teams and different groups coming in and out. So on Monday morning we'll have the briefings with the managers and the management, because although we have spoken already, I really need to better understand what exactly we're doing and why, and the purpose that we were talking about. Then it's a good idea to brief with the monitoring and evaluation function, because they will be particularly interested in this exercise normally. And usually we kick off with a capacity building session, which is a mix of the first module and a bit of the second, and the third is like a summarized overview of this training, but for them to know what we're doing and what I am doing there and what exactly am I doing there and so on. And probably the capacity building will lead to a first session, so they see the process hands-on. Because one thing that I've noticed is that it's hard to explain what theory of change is, and the best way to understand it is to go through a process yourself, to do the theory of change of your program. However, if we didn't finish, we will finish the next morning, and then we will have the first session with the second theory of change, and the third and the fourth. I'm very used to it and I like it a lot, so I've done 5 a day, but it takes 1.5 hours minimum, usually, and not more than 2 hours. So yeah, there's a limited number of ToCs that you can do the same day. If you have managed to do that, the next day you can bring people again for revisiting all of them. So the first version, as I mentioned, was the hardest one because, you starting from scratch and the diagram is not there, but reviewing it is much more gratifying, it's much easier. So these sessions are lighter than the ones on Tuesdays. And then if the organization maybe wants to add something else, like, let's map the indicators on top of it, or any other layer that we've seen, we will do that. We have 3 opportunities. We will do that in the third review, which is, again, lighter than the second one and much lighter than the first session. And usually the last day, we're going to debrief on how the process went. We're going to show the diagrams to the rest of the team. They're going to explain it themselves because they're the ones who know it best. Next steps, what to do now, and also if the process was useful or not. So to summarize, what you need to do for designing a workshop is first the purpose, clarify it, then the dimensions, what exactly are we focusing on and how exactly is this going to be shaped, and the methodology, which is often the same but can have variations, the agenda and the invitations, and also the deliverables, what exactly we want to have as final products, and probably we need to talk about the template at that point. And in case you're having terms of reference before doing the workshop or after, these are the things you should take into account. And of course, the people who will participate depends also on these dimensions. There's a lot of things packed in these dimensions, so the agenda and the invitations. And that was about how to design a ToC workshop. See you in the next lesson.